So welcome everyone. I am Allison Hall, the Director of Learning Experience Transformation here at in the University Technology Office at Arizona State University. And I am super pleased to be joined by Wayne Skipper. I'll let you introduce yourself in all your amazement.
Oh, thank you. Wayne Skipper, founder and CEO of Concentric Sky, creators of Badger, and super honored to be joining you today, Allison. It's going to be a fun time.
I also want to call out that we have Katrina Fogelson present in the room. She is a Badger super user and early adopter at Arizona State, and she's going to help monitor our chat. And so she's there for any questions you have as well.
Brilliant.
So take it away, Wayne.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I first want to say just how excited I am that ASU has decided to put on an event called Learning Man. I am one of those who actually goes to Burning Man every year. In my spare time as a hardware engineer, I design interactive data-driven lighting installations, which, as you can imagine, are very popular at Burning Man. You can see some of my work at lightatplay.net. If you're curious about that kind of work, you know, I've had work displayed at the Smithsonian and the National Academy of Sciences, but I'm just tickled by the name and really excited to be here. So, you know, diving right in, you know, my company, Concentric Sky, is a 15-year-old custom engineering company. So we solve problems for some of the most prominent organizations in the world. And we got involved in digital credentialing when we were approached by the MacArthur Foundation in 2014 to write a technology standard, which I'll be discussing here in a moment, called CreatingBadges 2.0. And as part of our work around that, we created Badger, which began its life as the official reference implementation for CreatingBadges 2.0. So this was our way of creating a reference model for other engineering teams and other organizations for this is how you do it right. Right, this is how we intend for you to use the specification, and here are all the things that are possible with it. So that was Badger's origin. It has since grown from its launch in 2015 to be one of the largest platforms in the world, if not the largest. We have over 20,000 institutional partners spanning 140 countries, a pretty broad array, you know, primary, secondary schools, lots of post-secondary, 2-year, 4-year institutions around the world, and a very large array of corporate partners. We'll talk about some of the interesting technology we have going on here in a moment. You know, our system is endorsed by Mozilla, and in fact, handing the role we'll talk about here in a moment to Concentric Sky is, as far as I'm aware, the only time that Mozilla has given an initiative to a private for-profit company. And we think that says a lot both about our engineering acumen and our values. Frankly, we see a lot of alignment with the work with Mozilla, and we're really pleased that they see that as well. So Badger has a unique role in the digital badging, open credentialing landscape, which I'll explain here in a moment. Badger is the native badging system of Canvas, which is a really excellent learning management system. We work with all of the major learning management systems, but you know, Canvas is one that we like to keep our eye on. They're doing a lot of innovative stuff. Portfolium, LRNG, eLumen, hundreds of products actually use Badger behind the scenes to issue digital badges. So when you come across a digital badge that is in an LMS or in some other system, there is a chance that it is actually being issued by Badger behind the scenes because of the really interesting infrastructure that we provide via the backpack. Our clients include the world's largest employer, that would be Walmart, largest US public university, here ASU, you know, largest online university, several of the world's largest manufacturers, and as I mentioned, thousands of educational institutions around the world. We've issued a few credentials along the way. Slide, please. Excellent.
So from the ASU side of things, we began exploring a partnership with Badger and looking into what digital badging and credentialing at ASU would look like about 2 years ago. And really, we developed a collaboration across the university through the support of the Learning Futures Collaboratory to discuss with faculty, students, staff from all aspects, how we can use digital credentials to support learners, empower learners, and help to democratize learning in support of our charter to create inclusive experiences for all students. And we launched those pilots in January of this year. And we have since issued over 20,000 badges. And so we've had a very positive experience. And I want to call out part of why this is about stitching together our lifelong learning stories. Sorry. At ASU is because of the two elephants in the room of digital credentialing. And one is, how do we maintain rigor? And the other is, what about employers? But here at ASU, we're really focused on the learner and empowering the learner to have those tools in their digital backpack to tell their story. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today and helping to discuss as we quilt together those stories.
Excellent, thank you, Allison. So I want to spend a couple of slides here kind of running us through the technology landscape, or as I like to say, what is a badge and why should I care? So when we think about digital badges, the original intent of Mozilla and MacArthur back in 2011 when they created the 1.0 version of the standard was very much akin to a merit badge, which is super appropriate for our context here, sitting around a campfire together. And their thinking was that you could take these sort of informal learning experiences and recognize them with some sort of digital object, which might provide some sort of value to the recipient over time. Fairly loosey-goosey kind of stuff. When they approached us in 2014 to write 2.0, what they had realized was that the standard as originally conceived wasn't well suited for high stakes credentials, right? So can we guarantee the privacy of the information inside of the credential? Is it digitally verifiable such that we can use it to represent a higher stakes credential, such as a degree or diploma? And so those are the problems that we addressed for them when we wrote Open Badges 2.0. And Badger is unique in the landscape in that we didn't just implement digital badges, we literally wrote the book on digital badges. We wrote the standard, we wrote the developer's guide, we wrote and open sourced the validation tools that are used throughout the industry to validate open badges across a wide array of platforms. And we also helped to create the conformance tests that are used to certify platforms to actually be in conformance with the standard. So our knowledge of this is unusually deep from a technology perspective. And when I talk about digital badges, there are two primary concepts that I like to make sure that we're all clear on. So a digital badge, first, is not a digital sticker, right? It's not just a merit badge. It's not just an image, and anybody can hold up the image and say, oh, look, I have the badge, right? The reason that a badge takes the form of an image is that the PNG and the SVG file formats support the addition of metadata. And so the credential is not actually the picture. The credential is a set of encrypted metadata that lives inside the image. The image is the vehicle by which we move the encrypted information around. And the reason we chose images is because then we didn't have to build APIs into a million different products, right? Everything can upload an image, you can download an image, you can attach it to a profile on a social network, you can put it in your email signature. They're really easy to track. That's why it looks like an image. So the view that you see as a person that might encounter one of these, just of the image itself, is not really the meat of the credential, right? There's digitally verifiable information encrypted inside of it. So not a digital sticker, the image is really the vehicle by which these encrypted data points are moved around. And the second point that I like to cover when I talk about digital badges is the idea behind what Mozilla, MacArthur, and Concentric Sky were trying to do with this standard, which is not to create a new form of credential. So in education, you have the existing ontology of recognition, degrees, diplomas, certificates, certifications. A lot of educators look at digital badges and say, great, throw it on the pile, right? I'll gamify a course or recognize a skill, or I'll find something to do with it. And those are valid uses of digital badges. But the goal that we had in writing the standard was to create a common machine readable syntax that can be used to express any learning achievement at any level of granularity, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a degree, a diploma, certificate, certification, or a skill, or some other form of non-cognitive assessment, or other bit of information about a learner that might seem relatively trivial in a context. You can take all of these, package them in a common format. So in the same way that a PDF allows us to take any sort of document content and put it in a format that we can all use, right? That's what badges are for. So they're not really a way to create a new way of recognition. They're a way of expressing your existing forms of recognition in a machine readable syntax, right? That's what we're trying to do with Mozilla and MacArthur. So those are the two main points that I like to cover. And when we get to the Q&A portion of this, happy to answer any questions about that. Common use for a digital badge might be creating a recognition of somebody, say, in a CTE context for, say, a welding certificate. You might want to link out to the description of the certification. You might want to include the evidence, say, a video of somebody performing a weld, and the rubric used to assess that evidence. The digital badge gives you a vehicle by which all of those things can be packaged together and moved throughout the ecosystem. So rather than saying that, a learner saying to an employer, I have a piece of paper that says that I, have an AWS certification, and in this case, I mean American Welding Society certification, right? You can actually see them performing the task and understand the rubric used to evaluate their proficiency of the skill, which is really, really important for employers. Next slide, please. So, part of our goal here when we were doing this work originally with Mozilla and MacArthur was to create a common language for learning, back to this idea that you can take a learning achievement, a recognition of something that the learner has accomplished or demonstrated mastery of from any source, formal or informal, put them into the same syntax, right? We think of this as a common language where you can express these things. And then when Mozilla originally designed the architecture, they put themselves at the center with something called the backpack. And so the backpack is a service that connects into every LMS in the world. It connects into every platform that issues digital badges, Badger, and all other things. There are over 1,400 different platforms in the world that can issue digital badges. All of those things are connected into the backpack. And so it is this backpack that Mozilla has handed to Concentric Sky. And so this is a service that we run. It's not something that another company can go and build, or it's not a claim that another organization can make. And this is something that puts Badger at the center of this universe, which gives us some really extraordinary superpowers that we use to service learners around the world. And I'll cover that a bit in a moment. But the idea is you can take your academic credentials, you can take professional certifications, on-the-job training, volunteer work. You can now connect systems such as Microsoft Teams. Microsoft's built Badger into Microsoft Teams now. You have a wide array of triggering badges, again, at any level of granularity, and then combining them together, stitching them into this sort of beautiful tapestry of what the learner has done. And you can actually show the learner where they are in that journey and what comes next. And so the backpack, again, is this service that is now Badger. You can find out more at backpack.openbadges.org. So next slide, please. So back in 2014, when we were first looking at this technology standard, being good engineers, we realized that there was a gap. And the gap was that we didn't have a way of describing the way that learning achievements related to each other. And so we wrote another technology standard, and that technology standard is called Open Pathways. And what Open Pathways allows you to do is to take any badge from any Open Badges compliant system and stack them together into a new form of portable data object called a pathway. And this gives us the ability to take say a Badger badge, a Moodle badge, a badge from D2L or Blackboard or any other system that emits digital badges, and then stack them together into a system of meaning. That system of meaning could be a competency framework, a skills framework. It could be a training framework at an employer, or it could be a curriculum at an institution, right? So those are all common use cases for that. And because these pathways begin with badges and end with badges, we call them stackable. That means that the badge that ends one pathway can begin another pathway at another institution or in the same institution, right? And this allows us to start thinking about the journey of the student beyond just the individual credential, right? I can actually look at this credential and decompose it into all of the sub-elements to see what somebody had to do to earn the credential. And as a holder of the credential, I can see all pathways in the world that are open to me based on the fact that I've earned this credential, right? So this allows us to present the learner new opportunities based on the credentials they hold, whether those credentials originate in our platform or in any other platform, right? And this is something we're able to do because we have the backpack. This is one of the superpowers we use to serve learners. And so this might take the form of, say, an AP course, right? This could be a high school setting that results in an AP course that then becomes part of a 2-year CTE pathway, real world use case for us. Or this could be a 2-year CTE credential that then articulates into a 4-year upper division type setting. Or this could be a CE credential that then becomes part of an employer training pathway. These are all real world use cases for us. So what we've done with Open Pathways is to create this technology standard that allows us to create these stackable pathways that are then portable data objects in the same way a badge is portable. And so if you think about this as a learner's journey, say through a course sequence as part of a program, the learner's status at any point in time, wherever they are, you can think of that as their transcript, right? And this ties together the world of recognition with the world of transcripting. Next slide, please. And so in the same way that Open Badges allow us to create a common syntax for recognizing a learning achievement from any source, and a pathway allows us to give a structured data representation to any sort of curriculum or competency framework, the user's progress through those structures creates yet another type of structured data that we can then use in service of the learner. So this might be a high school transcript, previously high school transcript. This might be a 2-year, 4-year college transcript. This might be an employer training record. Historically, those are disconnected bits of data that are all siloed in different systems. But because we've created a common syntax now, we can actually start to work on those algorithmically and add them together, again, in service of the learner. So we can take these historically disconnected pieces of the learner's journey and really start to stitch them together, right? We can do this inside the institution and across institutional boundaries. And so this raises what I think are two fairly obvious questions, right? One of which is, well, where do the data live, right? It's not a high school transcript, college transcript, employer record anymore. Where does it go? And then the second question is, who owns that data, right? Does it belong to the high school? Does it belong to the college, the employer? And so, we think that there are pretty clear answers to both of these questions. Next slide, please. And so the answer to the first question, we believe philosophically, is that the learner owns the data, right? So we believe, just in general, as a principle, that data should belong to the individual or person described by the data, regardless of where the data might originate. And this is something that we sort of promulgate through all of our work in the open standards world. We think of this as a key value that's really necessary to build into the technology. And then the answer to the second question, where do the data live, is where we start to see the application of blockchain. And blockchain is a hot topic. There's a lot of hype around it. I often describe it as a solution looking for a problem to solve. Realistically, blockchain is a way of storing data analogous to, say, a database or a data store. It's just a different option for how you might store data depending on the requirements of what you are trying to do. So, there are pros and cons to blockchain, which I'm not going to get into here. I wrote an article for EDUCAUSE called "Is Blockchain Ready for Prime Time in Education?" And I would say if anyone is interested in that, I'll put a link in chat here in a moment when I have a chance to that article for anybody that's interested in kind of like down in the weeds, ins and outs of blockchain. But the short of it is that there is a right way to use it. And the right way to use it is what we call a private permissioned blockchain. And we've collaborated with Salesforce and Arizona State to create an exemplar version of that, which is called the Trusted Learner Network. And you can find out more information about that at the link at the bottom there, trust.asu.edu. And we think this is really the right way to use blockchain with respect to credentials. We think that writing important records to public blockchains is fraught with peril. We strongly recommend that institutions do not adopt those sorts of practices. And again, I cover a lot of that in the article. So, the challenge that we then have is, well, how do we make these things, these records, intelligible as they move from one context to the other? So say we have some learning outcomes from a university setting, and then we have some hiring requirements from an employer. How do we build that bridge, right? You might colloquially refer to that as a skills gap, right? But really it's a problem of translation. And we run into the same problem of translation when we start looking at transfers between, say, a 2-year and a 4-year, or admissions in the first place between a K-12 setting and a higher ed setting. And so these are the sorts of problems that are solved by structured data. And I would say that the way we solve this is through what we call open skills taxonomies. And for those that are interested in learning more about that, we're leading something that is called the Open Taxonomy Project at opentaxonomy.org. That's a project that has grown into something that we're calling the Open Skills Stack Alliance. And I think will provide the reference structures needed to do this at scale to really make credentials and learning outcomes understandable to anyone that wishes to consume them. So I'll stop there. It's a fairly deep topic, but again, happy to answer any questions that might arise in the Q&A.
And so what this looks like at ASU, to give you some ideas of how we're handling this, is, we're trying to look at what the shift from a traditional transcript to acknowledging all of these leadership experiences, your study abroad, your internships, how can those all be represented in a learner's journey in their time here and beyond as a lifelong learner. And so some of the examples of this that we've done is, one, the Experiential Learning Network is going to be launching in the fall, and you can take a look at the website on this slide, and I'll put it in the chat later. And its partner, the Working Learners Network. And this is an accompaniment to a traditional degree, but it is supported with micro courses that are credentialed, that are badged, that align with our Arizona Board of Regents skills such as civil discourse, collaboration, critical thinking, and asking students to reflect on how they've applied that in their working experiences. So as you're in your internship, how are you applying critical thinking? As you're studying abroad, how are you collaborating with others and building an understanding of intercultural competencies? And having them articulate that, because that's really part of the power with the combination of a digital credential and a portfolio, is empowering them to be able to articulate their story. Oftentimes, students go through and they can only articulate what's on their transcript, but that's not really what employers are looking for, what the language that they understand. So by empowering students to be able to tell their story, they can go into those job interviews and be applying for jobs with the appropriate skills and language. Another example of this comes from our facilitator, Katrina Fogelson. She works with the College of Health Solutions and has been leading their work to attach skills, programmatic skills, with courses. That as students go through a course and they might earn a badge for module completion, it's also saying, hey, you're also getting all these skills that your potential employer, that when you go into the workforce, you're going to need to articulate that you've gained in this class that you might not even know. Another example that has been a huge program here at ASU is with our libraries. Information literacy, data literacy is so important, but it's really difficult to fit one more thing into an already packed curriculum or course map. And so they have put up a series of self-paced on-demand modules that are badged, that align with research skills, copyright, and those are able to, faculty can put those into their courses, they can send students to take those, and now they have a whole pathway of skills that they previously didn't have before or were unable to articulate. So in this presentation, what we're hoping to do here today as a community in our quilting bee is to get even more ideas, to reflect on how do you see this in your setting, for your learners, for your context, what ideas should be badged and credentialed, what should be on a lifelong journey. So when I put this up, I had a lot of questions about, are you a quilter? I am not a quilter. I am terrible at sewing. My husband's the sewer because his mother is a quilter. And so I am surrounded by quilts, and this one's the most applicable because it's in our camper. It's a little camping themed quilt. And really that's what we're talking about here is, you know, in a quilting bee, it's a group of people sitting around, everyone making their square and putting them together to tell a more complete story than any of us could do on our own. So we're gonna do a little exercise before questions to give you a little time to digest what you've heard so far, and to talk with your peers here, and actually physically get to make some badges, all right? So this is a bit of an experiment. Haven't done a session like this before, so bear with us and feel free to ask questions. To start off with our quilt, I'm gonna put a link to a badge template in the chat. And when you're creating your badge and getting ready to put in a badger, there's, you know, on that first slide that Wayne showed, there's a lot of things that you can put into the metadata of that badge to communicate exactly what an earner has done. But there's 4 main components: a name, description of this is exactly what was learned, the criteria, which is important in maintaining the rigor, because you can say, hey, they attended a 1-hour session at Learning Man, or you can say, hey, they completed, you know, a 40-hour internship. That is what helps to describe to anyone who's viewing the badge exactly what the earner did. And then of course the image. And so we're gonna, I'll be able to create images today to express ideas of what you think could be badged, right? So this is kind of you know, in a lot of these sessions we have, you know, send on a form 1 idea, write on this Google Doc 1 idea, doing the same thing just through a different format. There's lots of ways to make these badge images, and Badger has a fantastic built-in image creator. Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, all of the Adobe tools we've seen and have access to for the week. But I'm choosing Google Drawing today because it's super easy. And I've found that with many populations, I can give this out to a faculty, to a teacher, to students, and they're able to use this template and adapt it for their own setting. So you do not have the ability to change this. But if you go to File, I'm going to make a copy. You can name it whatever you wish. I'm going to stick with copy. And I'm going to show you a couple ways you can change it up before you go into your breakout rooms where you can sit around your quilting bee, design a little badge, and have a good conversation with each other. So one of the things is, if you would like to, we're going to ask for this session, you maintain the shape as a hexagon because they're going to stitch together really nicely at the end. But of course you can change that in any other setting. The border color you can change with this little pencil up here, any color that you wish. The bucket will change your fill color. I'm sorry for my color choices, right? With your image, you can use the little image icon to either search the web or upload something from your computer. And I'm gonna toss a couple icon, good free icon sites in the chat as well. And then you want your text to be descriptive of you know, what it is, what the badge represents, but short, not the entire description, because again, you're going to have that in your metadata later. Couple design tips is choose colors that are enjoyable to look at, not these two colors, right? And remember that badges will be quite small once you shrink them down. So try to aim for simplicity and cleanliness. So before we hop off into some breakout rooms to make some badges, talk about badging, and come back with some questions and ideas to share, Wayne, do you have anything to add?
I don't actually. I'm really excited to see what people come up with and what we can stitch together. So no, happy to be a resource though if anybody has any questions.
Yes, yes. And as you're in your breakout room, if you have any questions or want a facilitator to pop in the bottom, there's a little icon to call the facilitator so you can let us know if your group needs help or if you have any questions. Any questions before we go off? All right, well then we're gonna see you back here in a few minutes. So I'm gonna put a final link in the chat as a form. If you wanna send your badge in, I'll stitch them all together and then I'll send them out to you. I'll send them on to our camp counselors to show off what we did today. And I just wanna take these last moments to open the floor for questions, comments, like what did you discuss in your rooms? Any thoughts about lifelong badging? Let's see if I can call on some people then. I'm gonna call on Janet. Janet, you said something really impactful in your room about the value is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
Would you mind sharing that with the group?
Thanks for calling on me, Allison. Yeah, just, you know, we were kind of as a group discussing, have we found has badging found its footing as to what is its value add to people? And we just talked about that the value has more to do with perhaps how it helps me track and reflect and be able to easily go back and find, yeah, what were the things that I learned? How do I talk about these? What were the learning outcomes of that goal, of that particular session or whatever it was? So yeah, and that had kind of just occurred to me as we were talking as a group. So that was a really valuable breakout for me, is because I was like, yeah, what is the value of the badge? You know, in higher ed, some folks feel more skeptical than others. So
Yeah, I have thoughts that I might share if I may.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I would say that's a super important question, right? So, you know, a lot of organizations believe that a credential has value because of the weight of the organization that issues it. But I argue that a credential is valuable based on who wants to consume it, not just because you gave it to somebody. Somebody has to want it. They have to want to do something with it. And this is partially why we created Open Pathways as a way of consuming badges, so that they have an output that's more interesting than, oh, I can share it on social media. Oh, look, I did a thing, right? You can actually pull it back into the overall data structures, make sure that it's recognized on transcripts and things like that. But the real answer to the question, though, is kind of tied to this notion of open skills and competencies. And, you know, I would argue that the education sector, to a certain extent, has been pushing on a string with competency-based education, right? We know that a granular measure of mastery of a particular skill or competency is perhaps more useful than a measure of seat time, right? So there's a lot of interest in competency-based education as a way of recognizing learning. But when we start thinking about the outcome side, you haven't really had employers that have been able to express their needs in terms of competencies. And this has led to a lot of people trying to just match keywords, which I think of as the computer science problem, garbage in, garbage out. So part of the work we do at Concentric Sky is around creating these structures that, to give meaning to what's inside of the badge, right? The machine readable contents of the badge, by aligning it to competency frameworks, and then also helping employers to create competency-based job descriptions. And our work around that can be seen in something called the Job Data Exchange, which is a project that the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation hired my company to design for them, another open technology standard. But what it does is it pulls on that string. Right now, an employer can say, this is what I'm looking for, not the keyword communication, because that could mean anything to anybody, right? But a particular skill represented in a particular way in structured data that aligns to your credentials. So what you'll start seeing really soon is credentials, digital badges being ingested into applicant tracking systems, into recruiting systems and HR systems. All that work is currently underway. So I think that's the bigger picture answer to what value does a badge provide, right? It's the way of encapsulating the evidence in a way that it's then useful to the learner for the life of the credential or of the learner.
And I think that connects nicely to how does all that cool data get into the badge? And so I'm going to share my screen again just to show you real quick how you can take your image and make an actual Badger badge. So as Katrina put in the chat, you can go to your file and download a PNG or a JPEG of your image to grab it. And through Learning Man, you're all on the Learning Man Badger pathway. And so if you go to badger.com and you use the same email that you use to register for Learning Man, you can log in and you'll see your badges in your backpack, but you also have the ability to create an issuer. And through the creation of this personal issuer, it can be you, it can be an organization. That's something to think about, is who do you want to issue the badge? For today, just for showing purposes, I'm going to use my test issuer that, you know, just very clearly states, just in case any of those badges get out, that these aren't valid. But where I started in my playing around with badges was sending them to friends, just to experiment with it, see what it looked like from both sides. So when you have your issuer, you create your badge, and you can select your file or drag and drop it in. Oh, I have this one handy. You'll add your name. Learning human test badge. That has some implications. You enter your description and your criteria. And a criteria URL is also very helpful. So if there's a website that you want to point people to learn more. And you also have all these other choices of how it aligns with educational standard, tags that you can add on skills to make it easier to search and connect with other badges. And you can even set it to expire if this is only, you know, this is timely information that will only be good for a set of months, days, weeks, or years, right? And then you create your badge, and it's ready to share. So that's how you get that description and all that great information in the badge. From there, you can award it through email, through all these ways. It also connects well with Canvas. So without getting too far into the weeds, that's how you can take your image and get started playing around with Badger.
I might add just a bit to that if
Absolutely.
So
Please do.
you know, what you're doing there is creating a template for a thing you wish to award to somebody. And then the next thought is, well, what is going to trigger this award to somebody? As Allison showed, you can do that manually, one by one. You could upload a spreadsheet to do that. But then you can also use something like module completion in Canvas to trigger the badge. Or if you have Badger Pro, which is the professional interface, rather than the free interface of Badger, you can also create a QR code. And somebody can earn the badge by scanning a QR code on their phone. And you can use this in combination with pathways to gamify real-world experiential learning, right? So there's a myriad of things that can trigger a badge once you create that template. You can trigger it via Microsoft Teams or literally hundreds of other things. So that's just the template and the trigger idea. I just wanted to make sure it was clear to everybody.
100%. Can't use a badge if you can't send it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. I noticed going to the site that Microsoft Teams can now be used and integrated with Badger.
Yes,
How would the automated process be used in that environment?
So the first step is to set up the integration inside of Teams. Microsoft has some good documentation that they've written on that. We would happy to be a resource if you wrote to our support team. We could provide information on that. Once that is done, then you can trigger a badge that you've already created a template for via a simple inline message, right? So award badge to so-and-so. This is often used for peer recognition. And so you could imagine a pathway that was, get 3 out of 5 kudos from your team. Complete these pieces of coursework in Canvas. Complete this experiential learning pathway, meet somebody, go somewhere, do something. And then all of those together result in a credential for somebody, right? So it's just a different way of triggering one of these templates you've created so you can award it to someone.
So you said through the issuing of a message in the Teams chat, that would trigger it, or?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So, that's, most of the organizations that are using that currently are using that for peer recognition.
Any other questions before it's time to head over to the mess hall? We were talking about tater tots before things began.
I miss tater tots.
I guess one other question. So Zapier, I guess, can make a link to issue a badge, maybe from a Google spreadsheet or something. Will that also work with Badger?
It does. So we have a Zapier integration. Again, Zapier is a way of triggering the award, right? So you create the template for what you want to recognize, and then you can use Zapier from, say, Google Classrooms or Google Sheets or thousands of different things. When the action happens in whatever that application, it makes a call to Badger to give the award to the individual. So that is a really valid way of issuing credentials, particularly things that are not coming from a traditional LMS or from one of the other more standardized triggers.
Wonderful. And I'm going to repaste the link to our badge in the chat here, because I'm not sure if I shared the link in the form and it was prior to it being publicly editable, or publicly viewable. And so Diane, who is not here, and Luke had helped with that.
All right.
I don't think he'll put Luke.
I still need access, so I sent a request.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll take whatever I've gotten and stitch together a quilt. It might be a quilt sampler, but I'll share it back with you. Thanks for playing.
Thank you very much for the session and for Badger's great work.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Wayne and Katrina.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, really interested to see what interesting triggers or other work you do. So yeah, always feel free to reach out. Very interested in helping to promote that work.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all. Take care.
Thank you.